So, what's a big lesson about connection that you've learned from doing the podcast?
But I think the biggest thing that I've gained, and I look at all of this, of all the great guests that we've had, every one of us wants some kind of connection. And every one of us has a deep need to feel important and loved and feel connected with those around them. And they're not always getting that.
Hello, and welcome to episode 277 of the Quiet and Strong podcast, especially for introverts. I'm your host, David Hall, and the creator of quietandstrong.com. This is a weekly podcast dedicated to understanding the strengths and needs of introverts, along with strategies for success. Introversion is not something to fix, but to be embraced. Normally, we will air each episode on a Monday. Be sure to subscribe on your favorite platform, leave a review or a rating. That would mean a lot to me and help others find the show. Tell a friend about the podcast and help get the word out there that introversion is a beautiful thing. Mark Marrott has literally had to rebuild from the ground up. A 40-foot fall and years in a wheelchair reshaped how he leads and connects, turning big ideas like empathy, faith, and grit into everyday practices instead of just nice words. As a business builder, keynote speaker, and host of the Knee to Knee podcast, he sits down with executives, athletes, first responders, and everyday heroes to explore how real human connection drives resilience, belonging, and performance. He's an introvert who spent a career in outward facing roles, and he cares deeply about helping quieter leaders build authentic connections on their own terms without pretending to be something they're not. All right. Well, welcome to the Quiet and Strong podcast, Mark. Mark, it's so good to have you on today.
Excited to be here, man. Definitely. I've been looking forward to this.
Yeah, we're going to talk about the work you do, especially with your podcast. I had the opportunity to be a guest on that, so great podcast. You have some great guests. But let's hear a little bit more about you and your journey and, the life-changing event that you had.
Well, yeah, I would assume you're talking the life-changing event it happened 20 years ago, was the accident that I had. And so I was involved in a really bad accident 20 years ago. Prior to that, I was a wildland firefighter. And I spent quite a few years as a firefighter. And the reason I bring that up is because it ties into the accident. So my wife and I, at the time, lived in Pleasant Grove, Utah. And we had some huge spruce trees right around our house. And my wife does landscape design, landscape architect, master gardener, all that plant stuff, right? She just loves. And over time, I've grown to love as well. But we had these great big trees. She wasn't getting enough sunshine on what she wanted. And so she wanted a couple trees gone. And I did what at first was the right thing. The right thing was to call a tree guy.
Yeah.
And so I did the right thing. I got the bid, and having been a certified sawyer for the Forest Service, a guy that runs chainsaw, I've cut hundreds of trees down fighting wildland fires. I looked at this guy's bid and I thought, there's no way I'm paying this guy that much money for something I've done for years and I've done well. And, and in reality, it was cut two trees down, leave the wood, not grind the stumps. And this was 20 years ago. And he was going to charge me $1,500 for the effort.
Wow.
And I thought, that is just stupid. I'm not spending that much money. Well, I should have. Second tree, first tree was perfection. It went exactly like it was supposed to. Second tree, I was 40 feet up. Chainsaw damaged my harnessing and it failed. And so I free fell 40 feet to the ground, landed on my feet like I jumped a little bit more on my left side. And so my left leg and my left arm and head injury and all that, it is not what you want to do on a Saturday morning. And
Wow.
so yeah, to save $1,500, I spent, by the time it was all said and done, it took 13 surgeries to put Humpty Dumpty back together again, and well over $500,000.
Wow. Wow.
So the motto is, and my wife, and we say this tongue in cheek, but it's reality. Anytime there's something that I don't know how to do, or she doesn't know how to do, or whatever, it's now tagged as pay the tree guy, because there's always a professional out there, whether it's a safety or not, that can get it done faster than I can, and be more efficient and cost less money than what we went through.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow, that's such an incredible story. And how did you get through the recovery time?
Man, at first it was really hard. Initially, just like everything, the hard part was the change, the dramatic change. I've always been somewhat of an amateur athlete, competed all kinds of stuff throughout my life, and to go from that to all of a sudden laying in a hospital bed where you can't really move your legs, and my left arm actually laid limp at my side for about 3 weeks. Couldn't move my fingers, couldn't move my hand, anything for weeks. And that was a struggle. And I think the biggest thing during that time period was my wife and my family being able to be there. My wife was there. It seemed like day in, day out, which was an amazing thing. And I had a lot of family and friends that came and visited. But when you're an introvert like I am, those short visits don't do a whole lot. It's the deep visits. It's when my wife would slide the chair over next to the bed and we would have a conversation. I had an amazing orthopedic trauma surgeon. I feel sorry for everybody in northern Utah that ever gets in an orthopedic trauma need now. He is retired. He was, at the time, he was rated the number one orthopedic trauma guy in the region. And he was on call the weekend of my accident. And I say he was amazing because every time he would come into the room and which was daily, at least once, he always ended every visit the exact same way. And it was always, are there any, and I've memorized this, I heard it so many times, are there any areas of questions or concerns that you have for me today that I can answer before I go? And he didn't just say that and walk out the door. He would say that sitting down next to the bed. And he would wait for me to respond. It wasn't just a drive-by. It was really wanting to know. And he was a big part in those early days of trying to get through some of that, getting me some of that help, social workers, things like that, to help me process everything. But then some of those connections I made after, I spent the first few months feeling pretty, even though I had family and our kids and everything like that, we just really, really tight. And it was good to have that. I still felt there were part of me that felt alone because I was experiencing the physical and the emotional of what happened. My wife was experiencing the emotional, right? I mean, sometimes I think it was harder on my wife than the accident was on me because of all that goes on from a psychological and emotional standpoint. But I didn't have anybody that understood or could empathize. They could sympathize. I didn't have anybody that could empathize with what I was going through. I'm full-time wheelchair bound. I can't really use my left arm. By that point, within a few weeks, I could start and I get a little better. I still don't have full use of it 20 years later, but I was introduced to a guy that was in a wheelchair about 5 months after my accident.
Okay.
And his name was Kurt Brinkman. And he had a book out years ago called The Will to Win. And he was a Paralympian gold medalist, first guy to ever finish the Boston Marathon in an everyday wheelchair. There's old pictures of him on the internet. It's like, holy cow, this guy's in this just everyday chair. Kurt was a double amputee. He was from Shelley, Idaho, and was in a farming accident when he was 16 years old. And so I met him later in life after he was all done racing and everything. But sitting next to him, basically knee to knee, I jokingly call it knee to stump because he was amputated.
Yeah.
But basically right there together, he really helped me feel understood and helped me to be able to go, oh my gosh, there's someone that knows what I'm going through. So that was probably like 4 or 5 months after the accident. And then it was about 5 months because I've always been competitive. So 5 months after the accident, I was in my very first race in
Wow.
my everyday chair.
Wow.
And I was like, I'm doing this. And so I met Kurt after that race. So yeah.
How is that if one of your arms isn't working so well?
Well, I mean, you do the best you can. Otherwise, you go in circles.
Yeah. It's
Right.
amazing.
And so, yeah, this left arm, I mean, I have some strength in it. There is weakness in it comparatively. When I got into racing hand cycles for years, I would every now and then have to stop and just shake this arm out because the whole arm would go to sleep. So I'd have to just wake my arm up in the middle of a race. You're just cruising along. All right, let me stop and shake my arm so my hand stops tingling. And yeah, you just adapt.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that story, Mark.
Yeah.
It's incredible. So you already talked about being an introvert. You're a fellow introvert. When
Yes.
did you figure that out?
I've known that for years. It was really, I'll share a funny story with you. So on our podcast, Knee to Knee, we've done a couple of episodes on introverts. The first one was a how to for introverts, how to make connections when you're an introvert. And the next one was supporting your introvert spouse. So from the extrovert slash non-introvert spouse, how do you support that introvert spouse in their journey as well, so that you still have a healthy relationship? And I was very fortunate to have several psychotherapists. Every time I do all my research like that, I'm sending it out to a bunch of therapists I know and saying, give me some feedback. But it was really funny. I was sitting down with my mother just before the supporting your introvert spouse episode came out. And yeah, my mother, I don't think she's ever watched an episode, and I'm okay with that. That's just not her.
Right.
But she said, "How's your podcast?" No, she goes, "How's that thing you're doing?" I don't think
Right,
she even
right,
said
right.
podcast, right?
Yeah,
I think it was
yeah,
just,
yeah.
"How's that thing you're doing?" And
Yeah.
I'm like, "The podcast?" She goes, "Yeah." And I mentioned to her, I said, "I've got this episode. It's how to support your introvert spouse, and we've got this, and it seems that really introversion it's come up more than once." And she goes, "Mark, come on. It's not like we all don't already know you're an introvert." Just like, oh, great, right? And so I'm the brother out of all my brothers. I think I have four brothers. Introversion to me is a scale. It's a sliding scale, right? And I'm kind of what I would call a hybrid, where I can easily put on my extrovert face and my hat and do what I need to. But then when I take that thing off, I'm like, oh, okay, I'm done. Right. I've been a paid public speaker, been up on stage, had great events, but then I'm like, 2 days, leave me alone.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah, I mean, on the show, we definitely talk about all that you can do whatever you want to do.
yeah,
I
yeah,
personally don't call it being an extrovert. I could do public speaking and I am definitely a hardcore introvert, but I love it.
right.
But you have to manage your energy around all these things.
You do, and I get ready for my stuff very differently than some of the people that I work with, and I mentioned this. We talked about this on the episode when I had you on.
Yeah.
Was I get ready for my speeches very different than a lot of my friends do, where I will, if it's an hour long, I hand type out, just like we're talking right now, I hand type out an hour worth of speech. And then I read it over and over and over and over and over until it finally sinks in enough that now I can just use bullets. But I'm not the guy that's going to get up there and with 3 or 4 bullets and do it. We all have our own process, and I think it's important that we identify with what that is for us to be able to move forward with whatever we're trying to do.
Yeah, that's so key. And so I think we probably prepare in a similar way because we're introverts, but yet differently. So if I have a speech, I'm not going to write it all out. I'm going to do my bullets, but I am going to think it all out. I'm going to
Right,
spend the time like, what stories do I want to share? What points do I want to make? But I will have my list, my bullets. So and that's the whole key. You got to figure out what works for you. And
right,
often you have to take your personality traits like introversion, and there's many other traits that we all have, but like introversion to figure out, how am I going to be successful? Because I did do some presentations with an extroverted friend, and she prepared so differently than I did. And again, not good or bad, just different.
right.
Did
And
you
there
have
is,
to?
it's just different from person to person, definitely.
Yeah, yeah. Did you have to learn to embrace being an introvert?
I don't know if I had to learn to embrace it. I think
Mm.
I laugh because I'm thinking, I think I just succumbed to it. I realized this is who I am. This is part of what I need. And really when I most noticed that was when I started doing public speaking.
Yeah.
Because before that, just having little interaction here or there, that was, I could manage that. But getting up on stage for an hour and a half, the longest I've done is an entire 8 hour workshop.
Oh, wow.
But that one, yeah, I've never been more exhausted and
I
worn
bet.
out. than after. And I've done those 8 hour workshops 2 or 3 times, and they just kill me. But I love it in the moment. But
Hmm.
like I say, I think I just succumb to the fact that this is what I am and this is who I am. And my wife is the one who recognized it first, that she really realized that, okay, yeah, you need some you need time out.
Yeah. Yeah, you can use succumb and I will
Yeah.
say embrace.
Yeah. Either way, but yeah.
Yeah. And that's the thing. I've definitely done 4 hour workshops, not 8 hour. And just like yourself, I love it. And even with this podcast, I love it. I love talking with you. I don't have anything planned right after because I might need this little downtime. So
Right. And that happens, right? We all do that. So I think that's one of the things that we talk about introversion. I mean, based off of how an introvert's brain is wired from a neurological aspect, we need that time to you express that really really well in our podcast that we had you on, talking about just how the oxytocin is what the extrovert often lives off of, and then what the introvert needs to recharge is a very different. But I think there's just all of us, like I say, there's that sliding scale, and we
yeah,
find that area that best works for us.
yeah. And I think the sliding scale is more about how much we're tuning inward. And
Right.
I also talk about, yeah, we need time to recharge, but I know you need a lot more alone time for other things. I need time to think, time to plan, time to get some work done sometimes. So we need time to use our brains.
Right.
We have great gifts, great creative abilities, great imaginations, and we need some space to use those sometimes.
Yeah, definitely.
The Mark, we bust myths on this show too. So what's an introvert myth you want to bust today?
What's an introvert myth I want to bust? Well, I think the biggest thing that I've noticed in the studying that I've done, and I've not done near as much as you have done, but we've just touched lightly in our podcast. But I think there's a lot of that. Introverts don't need people. They want to be by themselves. Leave them alone. And I think that is a huge myth. They may not need as many people, but they definitely need connections. And some of the studies that are out there talk about somebody who is in extreme loneliness. Actually, that's very similar to someone who, if they have deep and extreme loneliness, then it's like smoking 15 cigarettes a day for your health, is what studies are showing. And so I think for introverts, it's even more important to be able to have that one or two, three people that you're really tight with. So I think the myth in my mind is they don't want to be around people, they don't need people, but they actually do.
Oh
More so
yeah.
than an extrovert.
Yeah. Yeah. But we want deeper connections. We
Yeah,
don't
definitely. Yeah.
we don't want to stay in the shallow for too long. I think that's the big difference. But there's very few people that don't want connection. And that's called something else. It's not introversion. Introversion just means we're deep
Yeah, you're right.
thinkers. And we may even like going to a loud party, but we might be done before somebody else, you know? And it just
Yeah.
depends. It depends on who we're with, the connections we're making, you know. My wife is a fellow introvert as well, and I don't get drained by her. I get energized by her.
Right.
I hope we just celebrated our anniversary yesterday. I hope that she feels the same, but she might not say it exactly like that. I might drain her from time to time, but anyway, so it just depends. But it's such a great myth to bust because it's just not true. We need people, we love people, we have family, friends, we like to collaborate at work. All of that. Just we might want things in different doses. And deep is probably the real kicker there is like we want deep connections. We don't want to stay in surface talk. And extroverts want deep connections too, but they don't mind. They like all of it. They like the small talk and the deeper conversations where we really want to get to the deeper conversations quick. So Mark, Mark, you talked about that you've done public speaking, and again, there's just ways that introverts go about that. Also, you're in sales. Tell us about that. Like what are your strategies that may differ being in sales from an extroverted colleague?
Well, for me, and I had to learn this years ago. For me, it came from really making certain that the person that I'm going to go see, it's not easy, and I recognize getting out there and going doing things. Getting started is the hardest part, and that's I talk with my salespeople that all the time. You just get started, but I experienced the same. Oh, okay, I gotta go, and but once I'm there, my focus then becomes to really try and make a connection with this person that's in front of me. What they're saying and what they're doing at that moment, I want them to feel from me that they are the most important person to me at that very moment. And if that's the case, if I'm really in that head space and heart space, then all the stereotypical introversion things kind of go away because now I'm trying to connect with this person in front of me.
Yeah.
I love going into seeing new people, and I'll look around their offices while we're chatting. I'll out of the corner of my eye, I'll be looking this way and that way, and I can identify things that now I can help. We can have a conversation about, so we can actually find some common ground and make that connection together. And so, you do that several times a day. It still doesn't mean that it doesn't wear you out, because I still get worn out by the end of the day if I have a whole bunch of calls that I'm going on with some of my folks. But for me, it's just making certain that that person in front of me is that important to me, that I want to understand them. And that is what helps drive me. And that's what feeds into my soul, is like, oh my gosh, I really got to know this person a little bit today. They're not one of my deep connections that I have two or three of that I know are there. But it's just a really enjoyable experience if I can approach it that way.
Yeah, awesome. And, our conversation so far, we got to start talking about your podcast because that's the conversation is all about that connection. Tell us about your podcast, Need a Knee. Again, I was a guest. You have had many great guests on. Tell us what drove you to start it.
Well, it was kind of a journey, actually. We started the podcast, coming up on a year and a half ago, and the idea behind it initially was I saw the importance of connections to our health, right down to our DNA, how our DNA has an effect on our health as well. And so we started the podcast from a purely a science standpoint, because I'm fascinated with science. But as time went on, our conversations, we noticed that they weren't staying in that purely science mode. They were more going into how connections have an impact on our health just overall. And so we rebranded it mid last year, and we rebranded it Knee to Knee, because I believe that is where those deepest connections happen. And when we're right there with someone, when you can feel the energy, because we all have energy about us, and you feel that from somebody else, and you can make that can you identify that person's eye color? I mean, you're looking at them that closely enough that you're looking at it, trying to figure that out. And so we moved it into Knee to Knee. And so now, a few months ago, we refocused it even tighter. And the focus, we started looking at the analytics of our channel, and the vast majority of our viewership and listeners are men between the ages of 25 and 50, which is a wide range. So you start looking at how can I deliver something good for them, and the focus has become how men can actually, in the transitions in their lives, because there's so many different transitions. If I'm single and then I go to college, then I get married, then I'm married, then I have kids, then I have career. All these transitions means that something gets left behind and needs to get replaced with something. And so we talk about how men can navigate that and build those connections along the way. And so that's kind of where we're at. And we've had some great conversations, which have been fun to have. Got to meet you, and
Yeah.
got to meet so many just amazing people over the last year and a half.
Yeah, awesome. So it didn't start out being about connection?
It did, but it had to do more with the science side of it
Okay.
than it did with the psychological, sociological, emotional, all that. It was just purely the science side.
So, what's a big lesson about connection that you've learned doing from doing the podcast?
I think the big lesson, it's interesting. I gain so much when I get to go back and do the post production. And you and I were talking about this pre-show today. That sometimes is my favorite thing to do is the post production, going back through and listening again intently. But I think the biggest thing that I've gained, and I look at all of this, of all the great guests that we've had, every one of us wants some kind of connection. And every one of us has a deep need to feel important and loved and feel connected with those around them. And they're not always getting that. And so that, I think, was the biggest eye opener to me, which is what's kept us going, is wanting to deliver some really good content to people with some great tools. And what can we always ask the same question at the end of every episode: what is one thing that our listeners can do today to build deeper connections with those around them? The answers are all over the place depending on who we're talking to, but
Yeah.
every one of them has been a really amazing answer. And so I think the what I noticed mostly from the answers to that question is those of us that we need to take that time to, even though I'm needing connections, right? Even though I need that, if I pick up my phone and I can just send a text to somebody and say, hey, I'm thinking about you. I just want to make sure you know that, hey, this is what you mean to me. Send. And that allows me to feel a little connected to that person. But it's amazing the result that comes back that I've seen. That my need for connection all of a sudden is not just now all of a sudden it's met, because I get texts and phone calls back. I had a call from some guy. We spent an hour and a half on the phone together after I sent him a text like that, and he was like, did you really just text me to say, hey, I'm thinking about you, I hope everything's going okay? I'm like, yeah, because I'm thinking about you, I hope everything's okay, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we spent an hour and a half visiting, and it was a great conversation. And so I think the biggest lesson is that we all desire and need connections in our lives, more so than I even thought of when we started the whole podcast.
Yeah. So, doing things like that, sending a text, does that come natural to you, or is it something that you've had to work on?
No, it's something I had to work on. And actually, because of that question we asked at the end of our podcast, that actually came from, out of that, 2 or 3 guests say that. One of my guests, his name was Scott Christopher, and he was on the TV show NCIS, and he's been on TV and movies and all kinds of stuff. And I felt awesome we had him on. But he wrote a book called The Levity Effect. And so that's why I wanted him on, because he talks about having levity at work and finding some happiness and joy in that aspect. And at the end of when I asked him that question, his response was to not just send a text. His response was, you're going to send a voice text so they hear your voice, right? But you're going to say this, David, I just have to tell you, I was thinking about you today, and I wanted to remember, do you remember that time when we had this experience? And you go through and tell this whole story about why you're grateful for that person, right? And yeah, I know you know this story, David, right? Because they lived it with you, right? It's not
Right.
but they're hearing it from you and why you're grateful. And then hit send. And then another guest says, the moment you think of someone's name, send them a text. And so I drive in my car a lot, and I'll be driving down the road, and all of a sudden I'm like, I haven't talked to Norm for a while. Hey, Siri, send Norm a text. And then I just chat it off and send it off to him. And sometimes I don't hear back. Sometimes I've actually had friends who we've kind of not intentionally parted ways, but time has drifted. Then all of a sudden they've come a little bit closer back because of those little things like that. So no, it didn't come naturally. It takes some effort to think and remember, because I can just run down the road in my own lane and forget that stuff
And be happy.
and be just fine. at
No,
least
but
at least for now, right? At least for now, because we all crave that at one point.
yeah, we need connection. And I ask you that because it doesn't come natural to me either. But as of late, I just look for ways I could do something more. Maybe it is
Right.
texting somebody or going out of my way to say hello to somebody. It's those kinds of things. And you know what? I just got a voicemail on LinkedIn, and it was nice because you just mentioned that it was nice to get a voicemail and hear the person's voice. That's not something I'm usually probably just if I'm messaging on LinkedIn, I'm just going to type something out. But it was nice to hear her
Yeah.
voice.
I had someone, ironically, someone do the same thing the other day to me. And all of a sudden I was like, oh my gosh, they sent a voice. I didn't know you could do that on LinkedIn.
Yeah,
So I sent a voice message back to them. It was kind of fun.
yeah, very cool. So, what kinds of things are getting in our way of making good, deep connections?
Ourselves. I think we all have, every one of us. I can call every one of my brothers, and I love the guys. How you doing? I'm busy. I have one brother who say, I'm busier than a one-armed paper hanger. That's his normal response. But we're all busy. We all get caught up in life and everything's going on. And it's when we get to those quiet moments, overly quiet moments, that we can actually look back and see. So I think often what's the number one thing that gets in my way is me, because what's the number one thing that keeps me away from the gym? Me,
Mhm.
right? What's the number one thing that keeps me from eating like I should be eating? Me. So I mean, we are our own best friend and worst enemy at the same time.
Yeah. So you have all brothers, no sisters?
Yeah, actually, in our family, we did. I think it was 32 years with no girls getting born in the family. It was
Oh,
just
wow.
guys.
Wow. Wow. And this question isn't necessarily about your brothers, but how do we make connections? Because that's something that I've learned that we come with our own personalities. I
Right,
come from a family of 9 kids. I have 3 kids. Everybody's different naturally.
right.
So how do we make connections with people that are different than us?
Wow, I tell you, there's a couple things. I think first off, it all depends on where they're in that it. And I know you don't like the sliding scale, but where they're at on the sliding scale. If someone's
Yeah.
really far over their extrovert, man, what it takes me is a ton of patience, because often individuals that are that far over sometimes speak to be heard where I think to speak, at least most
Yeah.
of the time.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Most
Most of
most
the
of the
time.
time I do that.
Yeah. Yeah.
I've been
That's
I've
how I
been I've been
talk.
accused I've been accused the same of like, you need to stop.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. Most of the
but
time.
I
That's important to say. Most of the time.
yeah. And so for me is, and I look at this from my brothers. Every one of my brothers is entirely different.
Yeah.
I mean, there's five of us guys, and there's only one that I'm kind of similar to. He and I are pretty close. But the other guys, even then, we're all so vastly different. The one that I'm most like, he's way more extrovert than I am.
Yeah.
We've been on fishing trips for days together as our guys. We call it fishing guys. And once a year we get together and go on a fishing trip. And after a couple of days, I'm just like, oh, uh, you know, and and so even around my own family, I have that limit. So how do we make those connections and things? I think with others, I think a lot of it has to come down to us. We need to exercise, and this is hard part. This is the most difficult thing for me, is exercising patience with myself and with others, because we are so different. And if I recognize that person needs connections too. If I can see past all the whatever is out there and what color are their eyes, find out what's deep with them, then it's easy to look past some of those things that are those differences in my mind.
Yeah, absolutely. And as we were talking about earlier, we don't like to stay in the shallow typically. Did you have to learn to get better at small talk? And do you have any tricks for it?
I think, yes, I did in some ways. Some ways, sometimes it's pretty easy for me. That's part that's not hasn't always been very really hard. But I think what I've had to practice when it comes to small talk is I've never been one that's like, how are you doing? What did you do this weekend? Do you have plans this weekend? Those are part of it. But how I get past to those things, I want to be able to have a little bit more than that. I was on a sales call with one of our salespeople the other day, and this sales guy's an amazing guy, but when he's in there, he's all business. And I'm sitting there just kind of looking around the room, and I realize that this particular person has some really, really cool quirkiness about them. right? And when I say, and that was part of, I'm like, okay, there's some really cool, there's a side of this person's personality that we're missing. And so I intentionally said, hey, tell me about this. And they full on lit up. And so if I can find something that I can see that's important to that person, like, tell me about this. And next thing you know, she was just telling me all about it. Oh, I see you have up on your board, seek first to understand, then be understood, which was habit number 7 of Stephen Covey's stuff. And I went, oh yeah, my wife was on his personal staff. She's like, no way. So you find those things that make a little bit of a connection, then the small talk is just natural. It doesn't feel forced. What did you do this weekend? Did you have fun? Did you do? We all have that to me is superfluous nonsense small talk, unless I'm past that.
Yeah. So we've talked about a lot of great things. Mark, is there anything else you want to say about making connections, your podcast?
Well, is there anything else I want to say? I think there's a different love. There's different types of connections that we can make. The types of connections that we can make. I mean, there's the physical, there's the career stuff, there's the man stuff where we're just doing stuff with the guys. But I think more often than not, there's a mindfulness and a relationship side of connections that I think really drives deep. And I think if we can find those opportunities to build those types of connections, each one of those, whether it's the physical, the career, or the guy stuff, all of those build upon this other side. But there's a spiritual side of that mindfulness relationship that goes way deeper than all of those that come in. And I think it's important that we work on those aspects more than any of the others in my mind.
Yeah. All right, it's your turn. As you always ask on your podcast, what is one thing our listeners can do to build deeper connections with
Oh,
those
you're going to
around
throw it
them?
to me.
Yeah, it's your turn to answer.
I will not answer like I had a guy ask me when I asked the question the other day. I won't give his answer.
Okay.
You'll have to go and check out the episode with Brad Zeman and watch his answer at the end.
Okay.
And that was one that came out a couple of weeks ago. I was thoroughly embarrassed by his answer. But I will tell you that what is one thing? The one thing I think that someone can do to build deeper connections is to take the time, the moments, just the moments. Even just asking someone's name, we don't always know that. At my hotel where I'm at right now, the young lady at the front desk, yes, you can go use this room. What is your name? Oh, my name's Crystal. And just like that, all the walls melted. If we ask honest, deep questions, when there's walls up in front of us, if we can ask and start asking some questions that we really want to know those answers to, those walls will come down, and then you can see who that person is on the other side. What was the home improvement neighbor, right?
Yeah, Wilson.
That's right, Wilson, right?
Yeah.
And so if you ask questions and you really want to know, that person will know, and they will sense that you are truly deeply wanting to know. Then that fence, that wall will come down and a little bit, and you can actually begin to see that person for who God actually made them to be.
Awesome. Well said, Mark. All right. So, of course, where can people find out more about you and your podcast?
Well, we're everywhere on the podcast world. So if you go to Knee to Knee, so it's KNEETO, so Knee to Knee. We're on YouTube, all the different audio versions as well. And we actually have a book coming out. I've just finished writing a book that we're in the final stages of editing. I was about to say and so we're at that edit stage, ready to do the book art, those kind of things. And hopefully end of June, we'll have that one ready to start coming out.
All right. I look forward to it.
So,
all right. Thanks again.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate you having me on.
Thank you so much for joining me. I appreciate you. I hope you take the time to explore other episodes and learn from other amazing guests. Remember, if you're interested in getting to know yourself better, there is now a free Type Finder personality assessment on the Quiet and Strong website. This free assessment will give you a brief report, including the 4-letter Myers-Briggs code. I'll add a link in the show notes. And I'd love to connect with you. Reach out at david@quietandstrong.com or check out the quietandstrong.com website, which includes blog posts and links to social media for Quiet and Strong and much more. Send me topics or guests you would like to see on the show. So many great things about being an introvert, and so we need those to be understood. Get to know your introverted strengths and needs and be strong.